This morning, I'm going to be presenting on the other two boys of Mary Gann. I do want to thank everyone for inviting me to speak again this year. I spoke last year. I'm giving two presentations back to back, and it's on the same family, on the other two boys of Mary Gann. I gave a presentation last year that included the first two children of Mary Gann. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a descendant of Mary Gann through her son Adam Alfred Gann, and I'm also a descendant of Ignatius Nathan Gann through his granddaughter Jane Susanna LaFollette, who married Mary's Gann's son Adam Alfred. If Joseph and Mary lived in this tech age that we live in today and had a Facebook account, they would no doubt describe their relationship as what?
Complicated.
It's complicated. Part of the complication likely resulted from the fact that Joseph apparently was part Native American, and he chose to use that part of himself to justify a polygamous type relationship. During the time he had a long enduring relationship with my third great grandmother, he was also married to another woman. And that kind of, I will get to a little bit of that in just a few minutes. The fact is, as David mentioned, cousin David over here last night, it kind of burst his bubble when he did the Y-DNA test, which he did a number of years ago. But he didn't have any Gann matches, you know, and those of us who are on the fringes of that big group of Ganns, we don't know what's going on in our lives, right? We don't know who we are. But David discovered last year through the research I did that he has a Birchfield ancestor. But because Mary was not married to Joseph, all of her children were born into the Gann name. There's a Y-DNA chart here. There may be one out front. I'm not really sure whether one got printed, but this is, I can show it to you individually later. This shows, I put Joseph Birchfield at baseline. We don't really know whether he was at baseline himself or not, but we do know what markers are involved in the haplogroup that he belongs to, which is J-M172. And indeed, our Gann testers who are descendants of Mary turn up with Birchfield DNA. And this chart shows the distance from baseline back to Joseph and the genetic distance between the individual cousins of the Ganns and Birchfields. The DNA work I did last year was vetted by nationally known genealogist Angie Bush. Angie sits on the board of the National Genealogical Society, and she holds a degree in molecular biology, and she currently is working for Ancestry DNA. And she read through all of my proofs, and this followed a very scant paper trail. I didn't even have the name Birchfield when I started this. All I had were two names, John or Joe. And then one land deed that had a Joseph Birchfield as one of the sworn chain bearers on the survey. And so putting it all together, and Angie's comment was, I hope you can get this published. Because when you go back this many generations, it really is remarkable to be able to use hardly any paper trail and be able to tie the genealogy together with the DNA. I'm going to start this presentation featuring a person who is not Mary Gann's son, and I will explain how we know that in a moment. But his name was George, and he was later called Judge George for some reasons I'll get to. And by George, we were fooled. 126 years ago, on April 6, 1891, George Gann of Bailey, Pulaski County, Missouri, stood in the county clerk's office and in a sworn statement said his age was 62 years and that he attended the marriage of Henry Gann and Annie Lindsay in 1842 in Jefferson County, Tennessee. Jefferson County, you might recognize, is where Adam Gann died in 1812. It's where Mary Gann lived with, at the time that she was born. And she is a daughter of Elizabeth Gann, whose 6 children in 1815 were deemed to be in a suffering situation. So to George here, it's plausible enough that he could have been in Jefferson County at that time, since he's said to have married there in 1847, but his actual marriage record to Susanna Mort has never been found. But George and his wife certainly did appear as neighbors to Henry in the 1860 Cole County, Missouri census, along with a William Gann. Researchers know that brothers often migrate together, so here we have the origin of the 3 Gann brothers stacked up there: Henry, William, and George. Now, the 3 Gann brothers were the precursor to the 4 Gann brothers. How many of us have these 3s and 4s, brothers sorts of situations? This is a chart that was published in the summer 2015 Gann Gazette. And one of the remarkable and really worthy features of the Gazette is that it encourages us to keep proceeding with research, even amid all the family stories, family histories, all the things that have been put into the Gazette. We're still encouraged to keep working on the research, straighten out these lineages, let's see who is who. So this 4 Gann brothers included a John Gann, who was born in 1814-1815. The family of the 4 Gann brothers was unknown, but it had been wondered several times by different persons whether they might be the 4 sons of Mary Gann of the 1830 census. Mary appears in the top chart. You see up there where it says son, 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 son. At the time this was published, Adam Alfred and George Daniel Gann, not to be confused with the George Gann I'm referring to here, had not yet been discovered to be Mary's sons. Some people said, yay, they thought that those 4 brothers might fit. Others said, no, I don't think so. And I looked at it and said, I don't know, because I had not at that time really delved into it very much. The birth years of the 4 Gann brothers were a reasonable fit to the 1830 census, but it seems that there have always been a lot of probables associated with and possibles associated with Mary, including another individual, William Anderson Gann, whose descendants believed was Mary's son. His birth year was also a reasonable fit with the 1830 census. And there was the matter of an 1840 census with a William who was named as head of household, where Mary was likely to be the unnamed woman in it. Censuses prior to 1850 only named the heads of household, not the individual members, so you have to kind of cobble things together based on later censuses. But Mary was not likely to have had 2 living sons named William, now was she? So that presents kind of a conundrum for researchers. So it appeared there could be a same name, same age, same place problem associated with the 2 Williams, that the 2 different Williams who could be theorized sons of Mary Gann. And this is not an uncommon situation where individuals have to be differentiated. Who was it mentioned last night? Wasn't it you, David, about the William? Mm-hmm. So that adds another layer of difficulty to research issues. So here we have William Anderson Gann in a list of records. I'll kind of go through these individually. In Jefferson County records, the person William Anderson Gann appears much more commonly as Anderson Gann than by any other name. And family lore is that he went by the name Andy throughout life. If that's the case, then it probably answers why he was recorded as Andrew in the 1850 census, because likely the respondent told the census taker that the head of the household was Andy Gann, and the census taker just took it upon himself to correct it to Andrew, because Andrew is a proper form of Andy. Let's see, the 1850 census is also the actual first known record found in Jefferson County that can be reliably attributed to William Anderson Gann. And on that census, he's not shown owning any real estate. 1853 gives us Anderson Gann, and he's buying one heifer for $7 at Henry Parrott's estate sale. You're going to hear Henry Parrott's name again in a short while. In 1860, we see Anderson and see that his surname was recorded as Ghan Gann. Is Bobette here this morning? Hi, Bobette. I'm glad you're here. Yeah. Bobette is a descendant of George Daniel Gann, and she and I made contact a few months ago. The George Daniels descendants, of which Bobette is part of that line, they adopted the Ghan spelling in about 1872, as best as I can determine. The 1860 census gives us Anderson, and then we move, and he's not shown as owning any real estate in that census either. The 1860 agricultural schedule records an Gann, and it cannot be completely determined whether this is Anderson Gann or Alexander Gann, who was Mary's brother, because Alexander was also listed by the Ghan spelling that year. I do believe it is probably Anderson Gann on that agricultural census. 1870 gives us Anderson, one N Gann, and that was the preferred spelling of some of the Ganns who went to Missouri. Only 2 records, both of them created on the same day in 1880, provide Anderson's first name, which we learned for the first time in 30 years worth of records was William. The census taker collected data for the agricultural schedule at the very same time that he was enumerating the census, and he recorded the middle initial A. That indicates to us that probably his full name was provided, otherwise and the census taker abbreviated the middle name to A, which again tells us that he went by Anderson in life, and that's the name that we probably should try to search for him under. In 1880, William A. Gann was living on 400 acres of land in the schedule, but he is noted as rented for shares of products, which means he was a sharecropper, and he had 40 acres under till and 2 acres of orchards. By the surrounding neighbors, he lived probably not far from the land that Elizabeth and Mary Gann acquired together in 1830, but he did not live on it and he did not own it. There is no conclusion from previous censuses that he had ever resided on Mary's property. Apparently, the 1880 census is also the only census that records William A. Gann's birth year correctly, as descendants do have a birth date for him. I don't know what it's sourced from, but his birth date is provided by them as the 5th of April, 1823. An 1823 birth year substantially shows William Anderson Gann could not possibly be the child born to Mary Gann in 1815, for whom she paid the fine in court. We know conclusively that Mary's child was George Daniel Gann, son of Joseph Birchfield, and he was born in March 1815 and is that child. We tend to rely on first names as specific identifiers across records, but many persons use their middle name as both their call name and their legal name. Some Ganns are known to have used their middle name almost exclusively. I mention this because one of William Anderson Gann's descendants mentioned in an exchange of messages that for years she just thought his name was William. And that strikes me in the face of the number of records that can be pulled up on him. It strikes me as a bit odd that she would think such a thing. Though a comprehensive search of records must include all the known names that an individual could have used in life, it behooves everyone to know what the preferential name is that a person self-identified as, because you're very likely to find that person listed in records by that name. And it bears mentioning that when you're trying to differentiate 2 individuals of the same name, a red herring is much less likely to pop up when 2 men live in the same place at the same time and have close birth years and share one forename in common but one of the two individuals never really uses that forename by his own choice. Thus, we can fairly easily conclude that there is not a same name kind of problem that exists in Jefferson County at this time of two different Williams, because Anderson did choose to go by his middle name and not his first name, whereas the other William never appears by any other name except William.